our virtual campaign this year in aid of commemorating National Arbor Month. It's called the Tree of Knowledge, and it's exactly that. I'm allowing some insight into the lives of young professionals, specialists, CEOs, and activists, and making that information freely available to all of you so that you can be inspired to join the sector. Today, I'm very excited to be interviewing someone that I met many moons ago at a Weezer conference, not knowing that he'll soon be my boss. So, Sabs, Sabs, welcome. Sabs is a water professional, but we are going to jump straight into the conversation because I want people to get to know you as the person.
That's me.
Okay, so yeah, he tends to be very funny.
Okay.
So, Sabs, what made you choose a qualification in science?
I think back in the days in our schooling system, we had like guidance where, okay, first of all, I was good in maths and science. So, okay, not to brag, but
Okay.
Gradually you go to do, I don't know what they do now, you had like your high grade. So I was doing high grade in everything. So being good at that, then they said, our guidance teacher said, all those who are doing maths and science in high grade will be scientists or engineers. So from those days, they started, giving us insights into what happens in science. Then I enrolled at university for engineering degree. And yeah, it didn't work out. I think I was more of an outgoing person outside, not like into designs. I love nature. So that kind of swayed my change into conservation ecology.
And do you regret that decision? In spite of being good in maths and science, where you are now, would you say that you regret the choice that you made?
Regret? No, but I think I would have loved to be an actor. Okay, just kidding. Maybe a lawyer or something else. But I enjoy it. Our environment as it is, it's so broad. You don't get to do the same things every day. So that's super nice. So you don't get to be bored. You get new challenges every day, and it's moving targets. So you're always chasing something.
Okay. And then upon entering the working environment as a young professional, what was that like for you, and what were some of the challenges that you were faced with? Not to say that you're old, but back in the day.
No, I'm old. Very old. I prefer being old.
Okay.
No. When I started within the water sector, I started as a graduate trainee, so I worked in many areas. I was very sort of curious to know what happens. I didn't just focus on where I was put. I started in water sector. First I started in forestry, where we kind of do broadly about IDP, how to do greening, how to move, how to enforce people not cutting the indigenous trees and all those. Then I moved into the water sector. Okay, first the challenges on that side was that I moved to a rural area where I'm from the city. So those were other challenges to adjust from your normal life to the rural setup. Then I changed again, moved to water sector when I went to Bloemfontein, Vryburg, and back into Western Cape. So the most challenging things, I think, was adjusting with the people who are there. You are young, eager, trying to prove that you know a lot, you've learned from university. And some of the old people have their way of doing things. And they don't just want to chop and change because the youngster now come in and say, this is what I've learned, and that irritates a bit of them. So we had so many clashes, but I adjusted because I was curious in learning how things work in the water sector. So I was like, okay, let me learn how they do them. Then at a later stage, I can tell them how to improve how they do these things.
Okay. And then you've mentioned that you've worked in the forestry side first. I didn't know that actually. And then you've also worked quite some time dealing with water quantity and water quality in terms of water treatment. So in your opinion, how effective do you think our environmental policies currently are in South Africa?
I think on paper, our policies are among the best in the world. The only problem is integrating that knowledge to the people on the ground. That's just my take. In terms of your integrated water resource management, the people on the ground, the people affected immediately by our quantity or our poor water quality, are not knowledgeable enough to make decisions or to make contributions in terms of treating those, not necessarily treating. If I believe if people are knowledgeable enough about, how it impacts their lives when they pollute the water in their own vicinity, they'll be more careful. And in terms of water quantity, I think generally our licensing kind of stream has done very well, especially with the collaboration, so to speak, with environmental affairs when they do their EIAs. If someone wants to abstract, and I think those intergovernmental relations work very well on the book side of things. But I don't want to say but. However, there's still some gaps where environmental side of things is approving some licenses relating to water abstraction, or water side approving licenses to abstract water, not considering biodiversity, not considering some of the reserve of water to be left in the resource.
So would you say that however part is more lenient towards the monitoring and the implementation of it?
Not necessarily. A bit of everything. There's gaps in everything, but the gaps that tend to find space in other people's or in a broader space or people's eyes is the part that the institutions are not doing their part effectively.
Yeah, and then you work very closely and on water conservation. In terms of water conservation and water demand. We in the Western Cape manage 25 municipalities.
Water service authorities.
Yeah, so how important is that aspect of water conservation, and considering the fact that you need to find this balance between biodiversity existing and at the same time ensuring that you practice water conservation?
I think listening to the media roadshow yesterday, there's a huge need to educate from the ground roots, because if people are just gonna take, remember there's agricultural use, then there's this domestic use. So the fights are always between the agricultural use and the domestic use. No one is fighting for the environment, the fish out there, the riparian zones that need a bit of water. So if, for example, when we had drought, people were saying, let's take 60 for agriculture, let's take 40. They were throwing in numbers, but no one was saying, let's leave a bit so that the fish can survive, or the animals can survive, or the, just to keep the biodiversity. If you look at, for example, people are not really aware how biodiversity works, or the whole general ecosystem thing works. If, for example, water is abstracted, then there's a plant that depends on that specific water, or water is polluted, then you get that that plant becoming extinct. You've got other recurring side effects to it. For example, if you've got a fish species that now sort of dies, then that fish species, you get like some other aliens now coming into play because that fish is not there. Or the plant dies, you get birds now not being there anymore because that kind of thing. And all stems from our use of water, not balancing between what we consume and what the nature should consume.
Yeah, and you've just mentioned the drought, and you also worked quite timelessly as part of the team that was, out in the field and just monitoring during the drought that we were faced with. So my next question is, having faced one of the worst droughts recorded, has our governing approaches shifted accordingly to ensure the preparedness for future reoccurrence?
I think behind the scenes, there's talks of, like a lot of paradigm shift in terms of how we do our planning. But to be honest with you, especially not on the government side, not as an employee of government, there's a lot that needs to be done in terms of collaborations between your public, between your NGOs, between your private sector. because you find in other areas. Okay, there was a what do you call it? A very good thing that happened in the drought. A lot of people now know that water can run out.
Yeah.
Because back in the days, people would just say, it's gonna rain, and then when the rains didn't come, people were not looking at the rains anymore. They were looking at people producing water, your municipalities, the government officials saying, why didn't you plan? And I always say, it's not about us planning. We can't plan for rain. There's a whole lot of things happening. Your global warming, your climate change, which impacts on whether we receive enough rains or not. So it's scarcely to really, but to go back to your question about preparedness for future events, I don't think we are prepared. If we were prepared, we wouldn't be running around now trying to install extra points of water for the COVID-19. There would be enough, everyone would be enough. The fact that we haven't reached what are those goals? The Millennium Goals. We haven't reached some of them. We are sitting at 95 and 99. Those 1% and 5% count for a huge number of people that are without water. And I mean, if we were to now come back to drought, and there's those people who still do not have access to water, and we are facing another drought, it will be very not so nice.
Yeah. And then just staying on the point of just that mentality and that shift, in terms of society, during the drought, we practiced water conservation. We told people to practice certain practices to lessen their water usage. We've had some heavy rains in the Western Cape recently, and we've seen our dams capacities increase.
Getting there, yeah.
Do you think that society still practices those water conservation measures in spite of the fact that we've avoided day zero, and some people consider that there's enough water now?
I wouldn't say there's been now a fallback. People went back to their old ways. The fact that whenever you speak to anyone on the streets is aware where the water comes from. It counts for a very successful story to say, despite that there are some pockets of people not practicing those water conservation tips that we gave them, but the broader community is aware that water can still run out. So in their conscious, or I don't know this English words, back of their mind, they know that I should not be doing this, even though some of them err now and then. But there's a saying where you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but during the drought we managed to do that. So I think more needs to still be done to say, don't go back to what you've seen the consequences of your actions during drought, which led to drought. Not led to drought, but during drought when there's not enough water. You can't now go back, because we might face the same situation. So let's practice better to have enough or more than enough than not to have or have less.
Definitely. And then obviously, I mean, during your time within the water sector, you also oversee and very closely involved with environmental education. So in your opinion, why is environmental education such a fundamental tool in ensuring that we achieve those two goals of 2030, and also emphasizing on SDG 6, which is access to water and decent sanitation?
I think, like when I started our talk, I spoke about integrated water resource management. So now you've got people on the ground which are primarily affected by water availability or water quality. And then you've got secondary people who just use it for maybe agriculture, but they're not there. Then you've got other people, us sitting in the urban areas, who are not affected by the resource quality because we get it water treated and everywhere. But once that water is polluted, we feel it in our pockets when there's prices change and all those things, because the quality of the product that is produced using that water is bad or needs to be improved. So water education at all levels, from if we've got this thing of educated child, educated nation. So if you have your environmental education at the grassroots, from your primary school up to high tertiary education, you wouldn't have people not, not aware of incidences that may lead to poor water quality, environmental impacts, or degradation. So you have all these things from the grassroots, people knowing what to do, what not to do. So that is why water education, environmental education is close to my heart, because I said, like, my reasoning of joining the science was I'm a lover of nature. So you wouldn't want to hike, and when you are up in the mountain or down in the river, you find like yourself wanting to drink water, and you just see all these bad things. And when you are out in the nature, you want to see a scenery. It's a peaceful part. You want to see all these plants happy, all these birds singing, and all these other animals running around freely, which they have food and like good quality water and things. So water education is for that reason, that we know we're not living in a silo. We're living with animals, we're living with other plants, and so we need to take care, because men or humans, they think they're clever, so they
he likes to say that
they tend to control everything. So within our control of everything, let's be conscious about how they perceive or how they react to our control. Because if now we canalize all the rivers, we won't have the plants or the animals animals that live on the riparian zone, because the habitat would have been demolished. So water education in that respect, or environmental education in that respect, tends to give people awareness of that we're not living together. We're part of the ecosystem.
And then just my last question is, how can we continue to encourage young academics to consider a profession in the water and environmental sector? And I ask this question because you yourself, continue to intellectually stimulate yourself through continuing your education all the way in the Netherlands. So just like, for you personally, how has that been? And then how do you continue to just encourage young academics to pursue a career in either the water or environmental sector?
I think once you are in, there's no way out.
That's true.
once you are in, there's no way out. So the problem would not be to encourage the professionals. It would be more to encourage those that will need to join in. There's a lot of opportunities within the sector. Like I said, if you are someone who wants to have a routine work, there's a space for you within our environment. If you are like me, who just gets bored and want to do different things, there's quite a lot of things that you can do within the water sector or within the science, water sector environment. From managing nature, from managing ecosystems, from managing water, from planning for water, projections and all those. Make sure that people do get, access to water, access to good sanitation services. So that there's just a variety of things to do. So one, if you are interested in, being out there, contributing towards what is called your SDG 6, we still have a shortage of skills in our sector. When they started with the 2020 vision, which is now no longer 2020 vision, water education, water and sanitation education, the idea was that we would then bridge the gap, the skills shortage, because they realized that there was an aging, there was aging people in the controlling them. So there's new technology. Those old people who were in the sector before can't really adapt as quick as the youngsters. So it is upon every youngster to find a gap, to say, okay, there's a gap in the water sector. What can I do? What can I contribute towards improving? Because water is life. I don't know what is environment, but I know without environment, we would all be facing a lot of challenges, plagues, and all these things, just because we didn't take care of our nature.
Wow. Guys, that is some insight.
Nice.
into just a little bit about not only addressing access to water and the need for water conservation, but also Sab spoke a bit about the 2020 vision programs that we have, which is now water and sanitation educational programs.
Yeah,
And I'm
we're
very
still working on that one.
and I'm very fortunate that I'm one of those people that actually came
Yeah,
through
our
the
product.
program. And I entered a competition, I got the bursary, I went to study, and I now work alongside this young man.
Above me.
He's
I
joking.
report to him.
But yeah, I get to tap into this knowledge and insight on a daily basis, as Sabs is actually my supervisor. So Sabs, thank you so much for joining us on this series and for also just allowing me to share some of your insight and what you do and your focus areas as a young professional and a water professional, just with our aspiring academics, researchers, graduates, and making information available, because we want to inspire young professionals, young academics to pursue careers in not only the environment but also in the water sector.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to get to be on TV. Is this TV?
It will be on social media, so
Okay, it's
YouTube.
close. It's close. It's close.